Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to Tuesday's edition of WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we tell it like it is. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion that is posted Tuesdays in the off-season and twice during the regular season. The huddle features WeAreSC columnists, staff writers, and historians. We first start off with the pregame show where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and then give you the latest USC football news. Let's meet Tuesday's panelists. A WeAreSC columnist who writes WeAreSC.com's The Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, and Sunday Takeaways, in addition to regular season football and basketball reports. He also hosts his own podcast show entitled Locked On USC, Marc Kulkin. A former William Jewell College DB and WeAreSC columnist who writes the popular WeAreSC.com column, Musings with Arledge, now has his own weekly WeAreSC.com video show, Musings with Arledge, and is a graduate of the USC Law School, Chris Arledge. Editor-in-chief of WeAreSC.com, a columnist, a recruiting guru, and a graduate of USC, Erik McKinney. And a weekly WeAreSC columnist who writes Fridays, The Obvious, Not So Obvious, IMHO Sunday, and is an active member of the Football Writers Association of America. Your moderator and producer of Inside the Trojans Huddle, Greg Katz. Before we kick off this Tuesday's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, here's the latest USC football news. Tulane tight end Alex Bauman caught a 6-yard touchdown from Michael Pratt with 9 seconds left to cap a comeback finish by the 16th ranked Green Wave of Tulane in a 46-45 win over the number 8 USC Trojans in the Cotton Bowl on Monday. In short, the USC defense gave up 16 points the final 4 minutes and 7 seconds of the Tulane comeback for a painful and breathtaking loss. Leading the way for the Trojans in the loss was Caleb Williams, who, despite a hamstring that wasn't 100%, still threw for 462 yards and 5 touchdowns. And receiver Brendan Rice had 174 yards and receptions from Caleb and 2 touchdowns. However, the Trojans' defense, choose your negative adjective of your choice, was punctured repeatedly for 305-yard Tulane rushing yards, and the Green Wave was efficient enough through the air with 234 yards. Trojans were put in a position to lose when Mario Williams fumbled a late kickoff. Trojans took over at the 1-yard line, and moments later, Trojans running back Austin Jones was thrown for a safety. It set up Tulane's late winning drive. Trojans now return home and will shortly begin preparation for the 2023 season that promises to be more challenging with the addition of Oregon in Eugene, Washington in the Coliseum, and Utah as well, and Notre Dame on the road in South Bend. There's going to be a lot of soul searching in the offseason on how to fix a USC defense that was, in the end, one of the worst, maybe the worst in school history, and a slight improvement, if any, from 2021. Along the transfer front, the Trojans got a big transfer addition with the announcement that Florida offensive tackle Michael Tarquin will be on the 2023 roster. And after the Cotton Bowl, Trojans corner Mekhi Blackman announced he was going to the NFL. Friends, WeAreSC's Inside the Trojans Huddle greatly appreciates your viewer and listenership, and we encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube to click on the red subscriber and like button. It's greatly valued and it's free. And as a courtesy reminder for those of you that are not currently a subscriber of the member of USC.com, right now for $10, you can access all the WeAreSC premium stories, analysis, and videos. The current new member deal gives you complete coverage throughout this season, the bowl games, recruiting, spring football, all the way up to next season's WeAreSC.com cycle, which ends on August 31st, 2003. All right, let's get into it. I'm sure there's plenty of emotion here. Panel, we kick off Tuesday's first half edition with the following. Your overall impressions of the 87th Cotton Bowl between USC and Tulane without any further ado. Marc Kulkin, let it all hang out.
Yeah, when the game ended, I think I'm going through the 5 different stages of grief, because when it was over, I really had no emotion. At this point, I'm not sure what the stage is, but I'm in the anger stage. But I'm going to dial it back, because I literally, to use a Pac-12 term that everybody will understand, I watched USC cook it. They gave the game away. I mean, you set it up to have a 15-point lead evaporate in what? I don't know, less than 6 minutes and lose by a point.
Yeah,
You're
16 points in the final 4 minutes and 7
okay.
seconds to be precise.
So you leave the stadium numb. And other than, my stomach feeling really good because they fed me incredibly well. Hats off to the Goodyear Cotton Bowl guys. There's nothing I feel right now other than a lot of anger. And I'm going to be really measured with my words so I don't say stuff I shouldn't.
All right. Well, I think that's just the prologue to the beginning of this.
Yeah.
Chris, we talked a little bit before we went on the air here, but go ahead and air it out.
Well, I love to say stuff I shouldn't, so that's not going to stop me. Look, that was the worst. I think that's probably the worst defensive performance I've ever seen from a USC team. I mean, we've seen USC give up lots of points before. Hell, the second half of this year, we see it almost every single week. But you're talking about 9 yards a carry, 12 yards of pass attempt, over 10 yards of play. And in the second half, I mean, it seems that, and look, I think there were 8 plays of 20 yards or more, 4 plays of 40 yards. There were 3 plays of at least 59 yards in a game. It was an embarrassing performance. It was one of those performances that I think shift the narrative a little bit, because coming into this game, I think there were a lot of people, I was one of them, who were saying, look, I'm not sold on Alex Grinch. I wasn't sold before he arrived. I'm certainly not sold now, but I know that there were huge personnel problems coming into the season. I can understand if Lincoln Riley doesn't want to fire him after one game. That's where I was. But geez, after watching that, you have to ask yourself, that's the guy we have faith in? That's the guy that's going to keep USC from wasting the last year with Caleb Williams, who is a monster. He's not perfect. He actually made some mistakes in that game. He might have left points on the board, but when you're as good as he is, and at this point, he is not only the best player in the country, but he is a future NFL franchise quarterback. He's one of the best college football quarterbacks I've ever seen. Are we going to waste the last year with Caleb Williams so that we can watch the kind of nonsense that we saw in this game and the conference championship game and against UCLA and the first time against Utah and frankly against Arizona and Cal? Is that really what Lincoln Riley's going to do? I need to dial it back. There won't be anything left to say. It was an embarrassing performance. And a waste of a fantastic performance by Brendan Rice, a breakout game from Rayleigh Brown. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was wasted in that game because frankly, the defense didn't show up at all at any point. And those guys should be embarrassed by what they did. They should be. It was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. That's all I have to say.
Erik, how embarrassing was it in your opinion?
I mean, it wasn't good. It was everything USC's been all year, right? They forced one turnover. If you go back through all those games and only give the USC defense one turnover in each game, they lose 5 games, 6 games, 7 games this year. Like the defense needed to create turnovers. This is what they were kind of all year. Now this was turned up to 11 a little bit. Chris threw out some stats. Tulane scored 46 points. They had the ball for 20 minutes in this game in terms of time of possession. They averaged 29 yards per completion. Like this is just make a play every once in a while. Somebody be the guy who makes a tackle when he's the first guy to the ball. Somebody take a great angle. Just make a play here and there, and you're not losing a game on Tulane's last offensive play of the game. So it was, they end up with 4 sacks, and you can go through, and Rajon Davis, for the first time all season, we got to see him a little bit, and he made plays. Mekhi Blackmon, pretty good in coverage when he was called on, and had a really nice forced fumble. Like there's pieces that you can sort of point to, but overall it looked like they were playing with 9 guys on defense, and it was either there wasn't a guy in the hole, or he didn't make the play, and then there was nobody there behind him. And it was just like 11 guys kind of strung out all over the field. And if somebody missed a play, like Chris said, that's going for 50 yards or 87 to tie a Cotton Bowl, a long touchdown reception for the. I mean, you're talking about a bowl that's been around for a long time. You never want to be on that end of a stat there. And then offensively, Caleb Williams is Caleb Williams. He's the best player in the country. I do not think the Heisman Trophy just went to the best quarterback this year. I think he was the most impactful player either side of the ball. He's that good. I think he's worth probably 6 wins by himself, maybe more than that for USC. He sets a Cotton Bowl record in terms of touchdown passes, and they scored 45 points. You go into a game, you tell a team you're going to score 45 points, and you start celebrating. That's enough. And so this was everything that we've seen from USC all year. Chris mentioned all the other games. Arizona ends up close, Cal ends up close. All these teams, you jump out ahead. And in USC's 3 losses, they held 14-point leads in all 3 of them. Just coast the rest of the way. Do enough to make a play here and there. And this defense couldn't.
Well, I will say this. I think all of you hit on great points. My first thought was after the game, they deserve to lose it. Not all the players, but the way they really blew it. How many things went wrong that had to go wrong in order for them to snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory. Going back to something Chris said, look, you got one more year at Caleb Williams. You're not going to win the Pac-12 if you have this type of defense next year. I'm sorry. All the great quarterbacks are coming back in the Pac-12. Of course, Rising at Utah, we don't know what his status is going to be. I guess he got hurt in the Rose Bowl. But if he comes back, that's another outstanding quarterback. You only can get 2 teams in the championship game. And I tell you what, if you're going to give up this amount of points, it doesn't make any difference if they score 40, 50, 60 points. If you're going to give up that amount of points that USC, and I think it's more of a complex problem. I think, it's easy to blame Grinch, which he deserves a lot of responsibility for what happened. His assistant coaches, I'm sure, are going to have to take responsibility for what happened. But most importantly to me, and having been a coach for a long time, there gets a point where the players are also responsible. The tackling has been breathtakingly horrendous the last 2 years. I'm not so sure that this year was all that different from last year. We just remember the last year, the turmoil with the change of coaches and the Cal game. But I'm going to be interested in going back and looking at the 2021 final stats. I know the schedule for next year is much more challenging than this one. And there's going to be a lot of soul searching in the offseason. I can guarantee you that. A lot of soul searching, which there should be. It's time for people to put up their big boy pants and make big decisions. So we'll see how that goes. All right. Panel, what they say, defeat has 1,000 orphans. Mark, what was the key to the game?
The lack of defense, the special teams blunder, the lack of a running game, the poor decision making from Lincoln Riley. If I have to, really just narrow it down, you go to those last few minutes of the 4th quarter where you've got Mario Williams back there who, for some reason, decided to do more than he should have. Worst case scenario, the ball goes through the back of the end zone. You start at the 25. Best case, the ball goes out of bounds and you get better field position. But to immediately follow that up and ask your offensive line to start opening up a hole for a running game when you haven't been able to do it all game, that to me falls on Lincoln Riley. He's the one who made that call. And I want to go back to his words. He just used these words just a couple of days ago when asked, about what happened in the game against Utah in Las Vegas. Quote, that football game, we got away from a lot of what we had done well to be in that football game. And we tried to identify the reasons of why that happened and why some of the trust in what we were doing wasn't there, specifically in the second half. And we've tried to learn from it and kind of vowed to be better in this game and to be the team that we were the previous 12 games. And so that's been a big point of emphasis for us. We certainly vowed not to repeat that again. Well, the complete opposite happened. So to say this, this team isn't that much different than 2021, there's a lot of new pieces here. There's a brand new coaching staff and a new culture that supposedly arrived. I don't know if you can actually point your finger at one thing, but you have to start at the top. And when the actions don't match the words, and you keep hearing the same words, but little change, as Chris said in the opening, the narrative starts to shift a little bit. He didn't want to address the elephant in the room with Alex Grinch and the defense. Alex Grinch wasn't there to discuss it. We'll see what happens.
Chris, your thoughts? What was the key to the game?
Well, the key to the game, of course, is an embarrassing, bordering on ludicrous defensive performance. But and look, yes, we've seen this from USC in the past, but I gotta say, this was worse. Erik mentioned they had the ball 20 minutes. I think they ran 53 plays and scored 46 points. Really, what is that? That's what happens when Mater Dei plays some JV team. It's ridiculous. I want to talk for a second about the kickoff return problem, and I'm not going to beat up on Mario Williams, who didn't have a very good night, but it's a really good football player, and I'm glad we have him, and he's going to make a lot of plays for USC next year. He's made plays in the past. Well, we've been talking about all year, how long is it going to take until USC loses a game because of a special teams blunder? Well, here's your day, guys. If USC starts at the 25-yard line, they don't lose that game. And I understand you have a hands team, and so you put your guys out on the hands team, and you drop back one of your guys from the hands team in case they kick it deep. But what that means is that in this really high pressure situation, they have a guy returning kicks who usually isn't returning kicks. And I don't understand why. Why do you need to do that? We have a kick returner who, and our kick returns aren't always great, but he's been catching the ball. And you can tell your guys, look, I want you at the 10-yard line. If he kicks it over your head, let it go. You can tell guys this. I don't know if things are better if you have a designated special teams coach. I don't know. But I know this. We've had complaints throughout the season that the special teams do not look like they are well coached and prepared to play. And on some of those units, it's gotten better as the year has gone on. But that was a backbreaking mistake. You can't. It doesn't get any worse than that. Maybe it gets worse. Maybe it gets worse if he fumbles it and they pick it up. But I'm not sure it does even then. Because think about it. It was the safety and then giving the ball right back that leads to a loss. They were up 8. He could have caught the ball, handed it to the first guy, to the first defender to reach him. That guy could have scored a touchdown. USC probably still wins that game because Caleb Williams takes him down the field and wins it. It can't. You don't have mistakes that are more devastating than that mistake was. And it's Mario Williams' fault, yes, but it's also the coach's fault for putting him in a position he wasn't prepared to be in, and for, it appears, not coaching him up on what he should be doing. That's not okay. This game was a series of coaching blunders and the culmination of of disastrous defensive talent, preparation, and coaching for the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm ranting again. I can't help myself.
That's what we're here for. That's what we're here for.
This is like a
Fans know what
therapy
you guys
session
think.
for me. Nobody's going to learn anything from any of this, but I'm going to feel better because I'm going to get all of this out of me.
Well, sometimes that's a good thing too. Eric, what's your thoughts? What was the key to the game?
Sorry, the key to the game was what Lincoln Riley said afterward. We didn't tackle them and they ran all over us. I mean, if you give up 205 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns to the other team's running back, you lose, and that's why. The single play, Chris is right. It's the Mario Williams one because of how that impacted the game. If USC takes over there with 4:06, 4 minutes or something left in just any field position and can run a few plays, the only way they lose up 8 at that point is the safety plus the touchdown. Touchdown 2-point conversion, you're still in it. It's tied. The best they can do is tie. You only can't give up a safety there, and that play leads directly to the safety. This is one of those where I don't fully blame the coaches and Lincoln Riley. I get, look, let's not give up the safety. Let's run for 2 yards and punt, and then, still up 8, we'll try to play defense. But boy, especially after that first down run gets stuffed, I thought, let's let Caleb throw this, right? Give him a chance to make a play. Caleb Williams is Caleb Williams. And at that point in the game, I mean, 2 drives in, you could see, okay, maybe he's not 100%, but he's not 40%. Like, this is not the last 3 quarters of the Pac-12 championship game, Caleb Williams. He's here. He's ready to go. He's playing. On second down, I like the idea of telling him, hey, you can't take a safety, but let's make a play. Find a guy, do something. To run it straight up the middle and then say, okay, let's do it again with Tulane. Clearly, all they knew that they needed to do was get in the backfield and tackle Austin Jones. That to me seemed like a miss. Again, it's not as bad as the muff that sets them up there, or both of the long passes right down the middle where the inside, the slot receiver just runs a little post and is wide open with nobody around him. Those kinds of plays throughout the game is what really hurt him. But that one, I don't think, again, because it's so obvious. Yeah, you run the ball up the middle, create some space, and then punt it. I would have liked to see Caleb maybe get a chance to make a play there. But no, the last 4.5 minutes, just, find the play sheet, close your eyes, put your finger on one of them. That's what did it. Every single one of those went against USC. I thought, you look at that last offensive drive for Tulane, they snapped the ball 4 times on first down. USC got an 11-yard sack, a 4-yard sack. They spiked it once and they threw an incomplete pass. Like, it's not only that they drove for a touchdown, it's that they were in bad positions to be able to even keep moving the ball. And USC's defense still found a way to give up a 4th and 6 and a 4th and 10. And then down low, you give up the touchdown. And so it was just kind of play over play. Yeah, you asked us each to pick one. I don't know how many did the 3 of us pick. There were like 17, I think, that we mentioned. So, yeah, any of them.
Well, I think that one led to another. The longer this game went, the more keys to the game there were. But I thought the obviously the Mario Williams blunder at the 1-yard line, they showed his face on television, and he had wide eyes, like the moment was too big for him. He did signal for a fair catch. I think where we saw the hamstring issue with Caleb Williams was on the goal line, because I think basically Tulane said, you're not going to run the ball. We know you're not going to run the ball. So to get the safety, they have to knock SC back into the end zone, right? And there was not one of those, is it a safety? Let's review it. It was a total safety. And I got to think if Caleb was really okay, he might have been the one to keep the ball and, do what he can do, but that isn't the case. I didn't understand the second play call where they ran it right up the middle again. They basically were saying, we're gonna get an extra yard for what? You know, they would be much better with a play action pass. So it was, it was very difficult to watch. I think any of these keys to the game. Panel, in your opinion, were there any major surprises or disappointments by the Trojans in the Cotton Bowl? Mark, did you see any surprises or disappointments?
Well, yeah. A fire truck just went by. Yeah, there was a lot of things I noticed that were really obvious. What really, I guess, surprised me after thinking about this for a while is how much faster and more physical Tulane was on both sides of the ball. The speed differential between USC and Tulane was gross. And it should have been gross where Tulane is looking at USC going, man, those guys are fast. Those guys are physical. USC was just, it was hard to watch. And again, I go back to what Lincoln Riley's, quote and verse. It was the complete exact opposite of what he vowed against. So, at some point when the players are saying we've got to finish and the coaches are saying we got to finish, somebody's unplugging something before they finish doing the job. Again.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark. You want to?
No, I don't want to keep going.
Okay, Chris. Any major surprises or disappointments by the Trojans?
Well, the meltdown was a surprise. I mean, the thing is, the defense was frustrating to watch all day, but the defense was frustrating to watch for most of the year. But I remember commenting, with 5, 6, 7 minutes left in the game that there's never been a point in this game where I thought USC would lose the game. And that was the case all the way up until, frankly, the muffed kickoff out of bounds. That was the first time when you look at it and say, okay, maybe. But yeah, I mean, that kind of meltdown was shocking. I didn't expect that, especially with USC's offense doing whatever they wanted to do all game. So, I mean, I guess you could say that Brendan, if we're going to talk about a good surprise, we can talk about Brendan Rice, who really played well. And I think a lot of fans have been questioning why he was getting the playing time he was getting for much of the year. And I didn't have a good response to those questions. But that kid played really well and made some tough catches. So that was a surprise and a pleasant one. Rayleigh Brown was a surprise, not because, I think we all know that Rayleigh's going to turn into a really good football player and that he's dangerous, but it's obviously taken him a while to adjust to the college game. This is a kid who's used to, well, one, he plays at Mater Dei, so he's used to having giant holes every time he touches the ball, but he's also used to just being able to outrun people. And I think we saw, not just on the long touchdown run, but also on some of the catches that he's turning into a weapon. And so that was fun to see. So that was a nice surprise. So those are the two nice surprises to go with the hideous surprise.
Erik, what were the surprises or disappointments from your viewing point?
Well, the disappointment was the game. I mean, you watched it. We watched it, just kind of the whole thing. I mean, I'm glad Chris mentioned Brendan Rice. He's a guy that absolutely deserves mention for what he did. This was a game where USC got to look a little bit at the future in terms of not having Jordan Addison. Again, he hasn't said anything officially, but certainly everyone expects him to go to the NFL here. Not having Jordan Addison, not having Brett Nealon and Andrew Voorhees, which is kind of my next surprise. Tulane, they didn't come into the game as like a team that had generated a ton of sacks or tackles for loss. And they did have 8 tackles for loss, but no sacks on Caleb. And Caleb Williams had to do occasionally kind of the dance and avoid it, but he's had to do that all year, and he kind of just plays that way. But based on how we saw that Utah game finish, as long as Caleb Williams could get through this game and not get hit in the back by a train, which is what happened against Utah, just flattened a couple times at the end of that when both Nealon and Andrew Voorhees were out. That didn't happen in this one, and I think that's kind of a tip of the cap to the offensive line. And you could hear kind of Justin Dietich, the way he talked about at the end. They're going to wear that safety, I think, the offensive line. They're going to be really disappointed in sort of that that back-to-back plays right there. But I do think there were some positives there. It just, anything except talking about the defense and the tackling and what happens going forward on that side, it feels hollow. The offense is going to score points. They're going to be good. It doesn't matter who the 11 starters are next year. They're going to score and they're going to be good on that side. It's what happens on defense going forward. I think this is kind of your triple exclamation point at the end of a season where you talked about it all year long, because again, Alex Grinch and the defensive players, they can talk about turnovers all they want. They can do all that stuff. I'm going to bet that they don't get as many next year, just because those do kind of have a way of evening out. I think you can still be good, but boy, that was a lot. The turnover margin is not something that you see a lot, and to try to go back to back with that is going to be tough. They're going to have to tackle guys. They're going to have to bring people down at some point, and that's from this game until spring ball, until the spring game, until fall camp, until the first game of next season. That's the discussion.
Well, I think you guys basically said it all, and I'm not going to prolong it. And I want to go, it kind of transitions us into the final question of the first half. How does the Cotton Bowl final result affect the Trojans heading into the offseason and into spring ball, Mark?
It leaves them both physically and emotionally bruised. They're going to have the players who are coming back, or the ones who are considering coming back, they're going to have to wear this at least up to spring camp, when they can start washing that taste out of their mouth, so to speak, by hitting other guys. It's also going to be interesting to see how recruits respond to this. There's already been, rumors and whispers in the back that defensive recruits are a little leery about coming to USC right now, whether it's the scheme, whatever is in the back of their mind. There's talk of, hey, you know what? You might not get the defensive development there. So that's something that Lincoln Riley is going to have to deal with, because he's got to close the deal. So as far as how it's going to affect the team going in, into the offseason and in the spring ball, there's just so much, nuance out there that it's behind the scenes that it's gonna happen. There's nothing else that we can really talk about other than tackling, scoring 40 points a game, and keeping Caleb Williams healthy. I mean, you score 45 points, you put up 600 yards, and you literally control the ball for 40 out of 60 minutes, and you win the turnover battle. I don't understand how you come to the end of the equation and it equals an L. I just don't.
Chris, what's going to be the effect here heading into the off season, into spring ball?
Yeah, I like a lot of what Mark said. Obviously we're going to have to see what happens with recruiting, but I think with these, the last two games, both of which were brutal losses, I think these are the sorts of games that are going to drive these players in the offseason. I think it was easy at 11-1, ranked number 4 in the country, for the players to think that, you know what, we've kind of arrived, the program sort of turned around. I don't think anybody can doubt that the program still has a long way to go now. And I think these are guys who, on consecutive games on national television, were humiliated. And frankly, that's probably good for them at this point, because it's easy to paper over problems when you win. And USC had a lot of games they won where the defense was bad and there were special teams mistakes and Caleb Williams bailed them out. But if you keep winning, it's easy to overlook all that. I don't think anybody in USC's program can overlook what happened the last two games. And this is a program that these are guys who want to win a national championship. Well, they're a long way from doing that right now. And I don't think anybody can pretend otherwise. The other thing I would say is that I think there's a chance this forces Lincoln Riley's hand. And maybe it doesn't. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he has full faith in Alex Grinch. Here's the thing. I look, I saw a tweet that showed these numbers. Alex Grinch in 8 years as a defensive coordinator has had exactly one team that was higher than number 50 in scoring defense. That was his defense 2 years ago at Oklahoma that was 28th in the country. And it's not like he hasn't been at programs that can get talent. Oklahoma, Ohio State, USC. USC is not the most talented team in the country, but I think they're 81st in scoring defense, and they're in the hundreds in total defense, and they're in the hundreds in yards per play. Look, there's a gigantic problem here, and Lincoln Riley has a guy he likes. I think he's comfortable working with him. He brought him with him from Oklahoma, and I think he felt good about him. And right now, the whole world is looking at Lincoln Riley and saying, what the hell are you doing? Are you serious about this? I mean, are you serious about this? You're going to bet your career on that guy? I mean, I've seen enough of Alex Grinch this year to say I have deep reservations. And so does every high school coach in the country. And so do all these recruits. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of USC's defensive players had deep reservations. So I think it forces his hand. I think he's going to be under immense pressure to make a big dollar offer to Jim Leonard or Jimmy Lake or somebody who in the course of his career has actually shown that he can put a good defense on the field, because that's something that Alex Grinch has not done. So this may be a silver lining game, but we'll see. That's the ball's in Lincoln Riley's court. I don't know how he's going to respond.
Eric, what's your take on the offseason here and the effect of this loss?
I do think it makes Lincoln Riley think about Alex Grinch more than before this game. And I'm not going to sit here and pound the table and say you have to fire him, he's got to go. I don't think that alone would be an answer. And so if it's not alone an answer, I don't know that you have to do it. I think there's other ways to do it. This was the 2021 defense for USC. At times looked like it did not care at all. It did not want to show up, and it was historically bad. The 2022 defense was different. There were some of the same results, but I think the buy-in for this team and that kind of stuff was good. I think trying to fix all the 2021 issues in one offseason, when you brought in players from the transfer portal and the high school class who were good and pieces, but you don't have 6 first-round NFL draft picks running around on defense right now. And so to fix this in one offseason with a new coordinator, by the way, who's teaching all new stuff, bringing in a whole new scheme and packages and all of that, that's a lot to be really good out of the gate in that first year. Now, and I mentioned this in our post-game video too, it's got to get better throughout the year. So you can't just say, oh, well, it was our first year, we didn't get better, because you can look at game to game. You can look at quarter to quarter. The fact that in the fourth quarter, they're falling apart, where at the beginning of the game, maybe they're playing better. Like those are a lot of red flags that you have to take a serious look at. I don't think that Lincoln Riley now, especially after this game, can just kind of, no, he's the defense coordinator, we're moving forward. He talked about taking a deep dive and looking at every bit of the program. Now, I think we know enough about Lincoln Riley to know he's not going to sit up there and oh, here's all my cards, here's what we're going to do, here's what I'm thinking. Like this guy does not tell us, the media, anybody, his sort of innermost thoughts. And so when he says deep dive, that could mean a deep dive. That could mean, hey, let's keep moving forward. I think we have a good idea of what we're doing. But no, I think there's, I mean, you just don't bring a full staff back year over year at this point. Guys get jobs, guys move, guys, look around, all that stuff. I would not expect this entire defensive staff to come back, just because that's how it is in college football right now. So you're going to have some changes. You're going to bring some guys into the via the transfer portal. But if you don't bring in a Caleb Williams or Jordan Addison on that side of the ball, right? If you don't go out and get big time NFL first round draft picks, you're still maybe just kind of bumping the needle a little bit. And based on what we saw this year, you can't do that. You need a significant, gigantic step forward. And the way you talk about, oh, 1 year's kind of quick to do that. Well, you're still here at this point, and you only have a year or less than that to get to where you want to be next year too. So that time is going to shrink too. So again, there are some big picture questions that need answering after this one. And really the Pac-12 championship game too, I think they started picking up right at the end of that. So it's not my job, right, to try to figure that out. And I'm glad, because those are tough decisions that are going to come from Lincoln Riley. Chris, like you mentioned, it's a close relationship with him and Alex Grinch, and he clearly believes that Alex Grinch knows how to do it and knows how to get it done. Some of the stats are kind of throwing egg on that, I guess, a little bit in terms of full belief in that.
Well, to Alex Grinch's credit, he has not dodged the fact that his defense is inferior, has not played up to what he calls whether they have a capability of a higher level, who knows? But he has been very forthright, and I appreciate his honesty. But that can only take you so far, because heading into this off season, you're going to get all these things, such as you've lost your last two games, It's like Chris said, it was a spectacle on national TV. And look at, Lincoln Riley's getting paid $110 million. So it has been reported for 10 years. That's a lot of money. Okay. And I think when you get paid a lot of money, you'd be surprised what you can do and how much you feel allegiance to somebody. The fact that he tabled a answer, maybe just because he didn't want to get into it at all, in the Cotton Bowl post-game press conference, was maybe understandable, but it left open a door. Let's just put it that way. I don't know how many more defensive players they think they're going to bring in. I think it was pointed out by one of the panelists here that, a lot of people around the country, I think Mark mentioned it, if there's that perception is reality. The perception now is Lincoln Riley is a great offensive coach, but again, defense, not a hard, big time reality. And other schools are going to throw that in their face. And again, there's going to be a lot of attention paid to Caleb Williams as the overall, NFL draft pick in 2023-24. And you got 1 year less than that to make changes that give hope. The problem with getting rid of Alex Grinch is really, what did they accomplish on defense this year? There was a shiny object of, we got all these turnovers and things like that. Well, look at who they played when they got it. In a lot of cases, look who they lost to, what are the records of those teams. There's a lot of stuff, and I agree with Lincoln Riley. You're going to have to really do some soul searching here on what perception he wants to put out there for his team. So let's move on here. I think this will go rather rapidly. We're going to throw some grades out here on what we thought of this game. We'll go in the order of Erik, Mark, Chris, and myself. Give me a grade, brief comment. Quarterback grade, Erik, for the Cotton Bowl.
It's an A. That was a bad interception he threw. Everything else, spectacular.
Okay. What about running back?
That's low. I didn't see, like, in terms of missed blocks or things like that, but a B-, like the numbers aren't great for Austin, but ran hard, really had that nice long touchdown run. So maybe a B for them, not phenomenal from them. But again, those linebackers can hit, man. Those two guys for Tulane in the middle that we talked about as like the keys to the game, where you got to get a hat on those guys. They were really good. I believe Dorian Williams ended up with 17 tackles or something like that. So that's what linebacker play looks like.
All right, what about the receivers tight end? Well, they didn't actually throw. I think they threw one time to Blake McCree one time or maybe twice. So it was really about the wide receivers. What grade would you give them?
The wide receivers, I think, get a B. Brendan Rice by himself gets an A+. There were too many drops. So again, Taj Washington had a drop, but kind of comes back, makes up for it. He goes for 100 yards. Terrell Bynum, I thought he had some good blocks, not a ton of numbers, but caught a touchdown pass. The drops hurt. The drops hurt. So you can't. I don't think you can go too high, but yeah, it's not like the wide receivers cost them the game or anything.
And the offensive line.
Offensive line, I think C+, B-. That allowing that safety is rough. I know it's, the circumstance, and if you're outnumbered, then that's a tough thing, but that's such a pivotal play. I mentioned no sacks, so I don't think you can go too low, but it's not as if Caleb Williams was just sitting back there by himself, unmolested for 10 seconds at a time. He had to move a little bit. And then again, you look at Austin Jones, 2.8 yards per carry. It's not like he had, massive holes to go through. It on a curve, right? Without those two All-Americans, like I still think it's a good performance from that offensive line.
All right, Mark, your thoughts on the grades you would give for quarterback, running backs, wide receivers, and offensive line?
Quarterback, A. Running back, C. Offensive line, C-. Wide receivers, B.
All right, Chris, your grades?
Yeah, I'm going to give Caleb Williams an A because you get an A when you throw for almost 500 yards and 5 touchdowns, even if you have a bad pick. And frankly, I think if he was healthy, we wouldn't have seen the bad pick. He just would have run it on that play. There was plenty of there was a bunch of green in front of him, and there was one defender about 10 yards ahead of him. He would have put a move on that guy and picked up 25 yards. He also threw. The touchdown, the deep touchdown pass that was reversed rightly, I think, to Taj Washington. That's a play that he missed because Washington was open for about 20 seconds and nobody's within 20 yards of him. There's no reason he should have thrown it that late. There's no reason he should have thrown it that hard or close to the sideline. So I've now pointed out 2 things he did wrong. And other than that, he may be the 4th or 5th best quarterback in America. And I'm not talking about college football. I'm talking about the whole country. He's fantastic. He gets an A. Everybody else gets a C. No, Brendan Rice gets an A. Everybody else gets a C. There are too many drops from the wide receivers. And those guys are, I think wide receiver was a position where USC was more athletic than their counterparts in Tulane. The Tulane secondary didn't have an answer for our guys, and I didn't think they would. And so, those guys got open and made some plays, but it was not a consistent performance. The offensive line, they didn't run the ball particularly well. I thought the pass blocking was pretty decent. We've had some games where Caleb Williams was under constant duress and he just finds a way to spin out. I didn't think that was really the case today. I thought for the most part, the pass protection was pretty strong. But you definitely get dinged for the safety, and you get dinged for the running game. The reality is USC should be able to run the ball better than they did. And so the running backs, I already mentioned Ray Leak. I thought it looks like he's becoming the weapon we thought he would become. Austin Jones didn't do a whole heck of a lot. I'm not sure he had a lot of opportunities, but he also didn't make anything happen. So whatever, he was just a guy out there rushing for 2 yards a carry. There are lots of guys that give you 2 yards a carry. So yeah, it sounds funny when you have 600 yards and 45 points to only give high marks to one guy. But that one guy is the difference between USC winning 11 games this year and USC winning 6 games this year. That's the reality. He's that good.
All right, so let's take a look at it this way. I thought that the quarterback gets an A. The running backs get a C+. I think Rayleigh Brown he's gotten better when there are plays that are like north-south, but he got caught too many times running wide, and he runs out of bounds, and his speed at this level is not going to be overwhelming because the players in college are faster. I thought that the wide receivers were a B minus. I think Rice was an A. I think that too many drop balls. Which really, I mean, some of them were like guys are wide open. Offensive line, I give them a pass because the pass blocking was very good for the most part, and they were dealing with a situation where Tulane knew that Caleb was not a big threat to run the ball, at least not very often, and so they had extra pressure to have to try to protect him a little bit. So from that standpoint, I thought they were efficient. It was hard to ask. They scored over 40 points. They were efficient enough, okay, to give the time needed. So they weren't the issue. All right, so we got through with that one. What grade would you give the offense in general, Eric? What was the grade that you would give the offense generally?
I think that is, let me see. I don't want to go all the way to an A, but I think an A minus, like that's a good performance against a good team. Again, it's tough because you want the offense to be absolutely perfect, and anytime they mess up at all, because the defense gives it right back, you're kind of like, oh, if they had just not thrown that interception, they could have done it. And so again, the grading scale, I think, for the offense is so hard. You look at the numbers, and that's an A plus. I think there's like one or two things here. They were talking about drops in the offensive line and that kind of stuff. So for what USC is kind of set out for itself, yeah, I'll say an A minus.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, it's hard to to give an overall grade that matches the result, like Eric was just saying. But you put up Caleb's numbers. They're fantastic. You put up Brendan Rice's numbers. You put up the wide receiver numbers. I'm looking at them. I understand, 37 for 52 is what Caleb is his, completion percentage versus attempts. But, he had a lot of overthrows. And Brendan Rice, he saved Caleb on a couple of occasions with his, with those receptions. So I'm going to stick with my grade with the wide receivers. And because of the way quarterback and the wide receivers played, I'm just going to go with a solid B. I was really disappointed that the offensive line wasn't able to do better in the running game, even without Voorhees and without Nealon. The guys who are out there played this season, and you're going against guys that, let's just be honest, and it's not to disrespect Tulane, but I would say 85% of those guys on that roster, USC doesn't even consider as a recruit. And again, they were out physical, and they had more speed than USC. So,
go ahead, Mark.
Okay. So again, I'm just going to solid B overall for the offense, because the offensive line and the running backs, they weren't able to get in sync with Caleb and the wide receivers.
Chris?
Yeah, I'm going to give the offense a B plus. Because of the failure to establish a consistent running game. That being said, Eric's right. We grade on a curve, and what we're grading the offense against is perfection. And the reason we do that is, one, because those guys are so good, and two, because the defense is so damn bad that you actually need perfection from that offense against any decent opponent. But that's kind of unfair. You put up 600 yards and 45 points, you should win every week. You just should. So I'll give him a B plus because of the running game. But the reality is, I feel bad giving him anything other than an A, just because those guys have consistently all year, with the possible exception of Oregon State, all year they've done what they had to do to win the game every single week.
All right. I will give them a B plus. I don't know how, if you score over 40 points, you can give them anything less. And you just can't look at just the final score. They did their job. They scored enough points to win. All right. This is going to be, I'm sure we're going to go through this like a hot knife through butter. Sorry for the bad cliche, but Let's turn to defense, give out specific grades for each individual defensive unit. Eric, tell me what you feel about the defensive line, rush game, linebackers, and the secondary. Go for it.
No, I'm not going to do that. I'm skipping to the end. It's an F for all of them. I mean, that's it, right? It doesn't make sense to kind of parse through and do position by position. It was just a failure across the board at every level. There's individuals who made individual plays. I don't know if any individual had a great game and is going to say, yeah, that was me for 4 quarters and 60 minutes. Sorry, 20 minutes, the amount of time Tulane had the ball for. Again, Tulane had a sack that was big and got held consistently when he was on the field. I think that's something you could take a look back at tape, and it's nuts. Mekhi Blackman's forced fumble was great. Rajon Davis had made, between him and Bryson Shaw, those 2 hits are kind of the only hits that you're going to put on film and say, yeah, this is what we want this to be like. Individual plays, a handful of them, it's F's across the board. And the other 2 are going to say the same thing.
Mark?
They got an F. There's no, look, we don't need to go through each position group. I don't even know if there was, I know there was an effort on offense, and I saw a little bit of effort on defense, but man, you hate to look at those guys in the face and say, could you have done more? I mean, they have to look in the mirror and ask themselves that. And again, it comes down to what type. We didn't see any type of improvement from game 1 to game 14. None.
All right, Chris.
Yeah, I obviously agree with the other guys. It was a terrible, embarrassing performance. And I wish I could point out a guy on that defense who was playing with his hair on fire and hitting people and making plays when all of his teammates around him were screwing up. I wish I could do that. And maybe there's somebody like that, and it was hidden from me as I sat in the stadium. Maybe if I watched film, I could see it, but I doubt it. It was a terrible performance, all up and down. Terrible for all of the units. Terrible by the coaching staff. Terrible, terrible, terrible. It was embarrassing, and I hope we never see that again.
All right, and I will cap it off by saying all Fs. There was a couple of individual plays, like you pointed out, but overall, that's an F. What else could you give it? They couldn't stop anything. They couldn't stop anybody, and you reap what you sow. So with that, I don't think we need to really go over the final defensive grade. Are we all agree it's an F for the most part? So let's move on here. Your overall brief comment on special teams. How did you feel about it? Eric, what'd you think about the special teams?
I don't blame Dennis Lynch for missing the long field goal. I still look, I know the spring game is not the Cotton Bowl. We watched Alex Stadhouse drill a 55-yarder with plenty of room in the spring game. Like that guy's got a leg. I'm still surprised that he didn't get a shot in a game this year, because Dennis Lynch was not perfect. I think when you have this kind of offense, and again, you're scoring that many points, he was probably good enough. That'll kind of be an interesting, I think, spot to monitor. I wish I had the numbers in front of me, and I am going to go through them. And at some point on this show, I'll have them. I'm going to look at how many yards lost USC had all season by returning kickoffs, because I guarantee you, if they had just fair caught it and started every drive at the 25, they would have been a net positive from where they actually started every drive. Again, if I'm wrong, I'll have the numbers at some point when I go look through those. But would not surprise me if it was actually maybe a substantial negative for them this year. So again, you had 2, and one was a muff and one was a play where clearly there should have been a face mask called, and you redo it. But punters were not on the field basically for the entire game. I mean, we talk about the USC offensive statistics in a game they lost. They didn't punt. They didn't punt in a game that they lost by a point. So no, not great special teams. We talked about the Tulane, the drives, the safety, the whatever. They had a 37-yard kick return in there too to kind of launch one of those drives there. So No, not great. Not great special teams. Less than a C, probably more like a D, just because of how little they were on the field and how impactful some of the plays were negatively.
Mark?
They recovered the onside kick beautifully.
Well, there's a positive.
There was some, I had to dig deep. I found one.
Okay. Chris, what did you think?
I mean, well, you probably know what I think. I'm not sure why they attempted the 52-yarder. It didn't make any sense to me. When they sent the field goal unit out, I said he doesn't have a leg to make it. He's not a bad kicker. He's not a great kicker, but he's not a bad kicker, and he's a snazzy dresser. But when they sent him out there, I said, "There's no way he has the leg to make this kick. What are you doing?" And then he kicked it straight and came up short. It was dumb. It was what that was. That was dumb. On the kickoff unit, Eric's not wrong. I haven't done the numbers, but I'll tell you right now, he's right. They're losing yards every single game by simply not taking the touchback. And the thing that's frustrating is that in order to get a return, which is apparently what they're dead set on trying to do, you have to get your guys to sprint back near the return man and then set up their blocks. But if you watch what happens, there is such a huge gap between the returner and his blockers that you have guys just funneling around the outside, and then he has to try to make people miss just to get back to the 25. He had a couple of nice returns, actually, where he got back to like the 22-yard line. I thought, hey, it was a really great run to get back to the 22. I don't know why we're doing it. I mean, that's just, I don't understand why we insist on returning kicks when we haven't had any success and we're not even doing it right. If you're setting up the blocks at the 30 and he's catching it at the 2, you're not going to have success. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe if we had a designated special teams coach, maybe we wouldn't be terrible on special teams. I don't know. But the special teams have been poor all year. And units like the kick return team, the kickoff team, they've been below average all year. I mean, almost every week, the other team's kickoff unit does more than USC's kickoff unit, almost every single week. So I don't know. I guess we're just used to that at this point. I don't have anything more to say about special teams. I didn't like them.
Well, I will only add to say it'll be interesting to see if Lincoln Riley has I don't want to use the word epiphany because it sounds like a put down, but whether he reevaluates how he feels about special teams and having a special teams coach. All right, let's.
I can guarantee you, I can pretty much guarantee you he will not. That is a set plan for him. He came out very strongly and said, "No, that's not what we do. This is how we run special teams." It would shock me if
I don't know. He went and hit the portal pretty hard and snatched the all-conference guy from Arizona State. He might be having that epiphany right in front of our own eyes.
They've got Ryan Doherty is the kicking coach. He's kind of the special teams analyst. I think that a lot to do with being able to go out and get him again. I guess I can't guarantee that Lincoln Riley will do or not do anything. It would very much surprise me if USC ends up with a dedicated special teams coach next year, the way he completely dismissed the idea of a special teams coach coaching one segment of practice, each practice and then being done. Like there was no consideration at all given to doing that.
All right, let's just give a single grade, no comment, because I think we've touched pretty much everything. Your overall grade for the Trojans in the Cotton Bowl, Eric?
I love that question. I can't wait to hear what sort of answers we get.
Look, it's an F. You had to win the game or you lose the game, and you lose the game, so you failed to win the game. And if you fail to do something, then you get an F. It's harsh, right, for the whole team to get that, but you win as a team and you lose as a team, and that's what you end up with here.
Okay, Mark?
Yeah, I'm not going to give them an F. They didn't pass the test. I mean, everyone said that I've been on the tangent for the last couple of weeks that this was a meaningless game, because in the overall scheme of things, if you're not in the playoffs, who cares? The game mattered because we're talking about the way we are. So I don't know. Besides, like I said, I thought I was treated great. I would love to go back to the Cotton Bowl again, especially if it's part of the playoff rotation. But other than that, I've got an upset stomach because that defense was really, really hard to watch. US, again, I'll go back to the top of the show. USC couged it. You win as a team, you lose as a team. From the coaching staff to the special teams, they couged it. They gave up 16 points in 4 minutes, whatever that number was.
So what grade do you give him for the game overall?
A D-.
All right, Chris?
Now they get an F. It was an historic meltdown. You know, before that, when USC kicks that field goal to go 45-30, I went and checked ESPN.com, and they were at 99.7% to win that game. You know, they have that little tracker on GameCast. All right, if you go from 99.7% to losing the game in the last 4 minutes, you get an F. And the offense, while the offense did plenty to win that game, the offense also contributed to that, right? They settled for a field goal because they got stopped, and then they get the safety on their other possession. And so, yeah, the defense was horrendous. The special teams blunder was critical, but the offense on their last 2 possessions also didn't get it done. It was a team effort in the last 4.5 minutes of that game. And if you have an embarrassing, historic meltdown like that, you get an F.
All right. Well, I'm giving him a D-.
Too high.
The reason for that is simply I didn't think the offense failed, but as far as those plays that created the safety situation, those were Lincoln Riley calls. You know, he can blame himself for putting them in a position like that. They were just following his direction. If he's going to get credit for the great plays, which he, you know, has many of them, you know, you got to take credit for that. Obviously, the F is for the defense, but I can't give the team an F grade because the offense did score over 40 points. All right, let's wrap this up with a couple of some questions here, short questions that came in from Mark in Studio City. After watching the Cotton Bowl and our loss to Tulane, should Alex Grinch be fired, or is this a talent problem? Just jump in, guys. What do you think? Grinch or a talent problem?
It's not either or. They got both are a problem. Right? They've got both are a problem. Mark had mentioned that 85% of those Tulane guys would not have been considered as scholarship players at USC. Maybe they should have been, because Tulane had some guys on that defense. I was looking and saying, man, I wish we had that guy. That guy looks better than anybody we've got. It's a talent problem, and it's a Grinch problem, and it's a Dante Williams problem. There are probably some other problems that I don't even know about yet.
Anybody else want to add to that answer?
I think everybody knows our answer. It's Chris said it. It's not either or. It's not a zero-sum game. However, you can't fire the team. You can ask them to leave.
Now.
Well, you can ask certain players to leave.
That's true.
You can't ask all 80. You can't ask 40 whatever on defense to leave.
I mean, you could, right? I
understand what you're saying. Yes.
I think Alex Grinch could be a good defensive coordinator, and the talent might be close, but it sure felt like there was just something where it was like, we want to do this, and then you watch the game and it's like they're not doing that, and it's like, well, we want them to do this, and it's like they're still not doing that. And so there's just something, right? Like you can make a really good meal but serve it at the wrong time of the day, and it's like, oh, that didn't really work for me. So I do think, like you're saying, it's that. But look, when you talk about talent on defense, they brought in Eric Gentry, they brought in Shane Lee. I think those guys are solid players. They weren't, when Alabama went out and got Henry Toto from Tennessee, like that's a guy that comes in and he's phenomenal for you, right? Like Will Anderson for Alabama, he didn't go anywhere, but there are guys like that moved or that will move, and those are the guys I think where it becomes they become real difference makers for you on defense. I think Mekhi Blackmon was really good this year. I don't think he's a first round NFL corner, which again is no slight on anybody. There's 32 guys that in all of college football that go in the first round. So that's kind of what we're talking about. We're not talking, even when you talk about Tulane, right? A phenomenal defensive player, unbelievably good. When you look at mock drafts right now, he's not showing up in the first round. He's not showing up as a first rounder right now. And I think the assumption is that he'll probably go into the draft here. So again, you don't have no-brainer first round picks, which when you go look at Georgia, when you look at Ohio State, when you look at some of these programs that are there every year, they've got those guys. They've got erasers at linebacker and at safety where 10 guys messed up on a play and this guy still makes the play and gives up 2 yards because he can do that. I don't know how many of those guys USC has right now. And based on kind of the commitments so far in the transfer portal, again, I think there's some talent in there. We'll see, right? You kind of don't know until they start playing. I don't know if a lot of people thought Mekhi Blackman would be as good as he was. I thought he was a pretty good player coming over. He ended up being really good. So again, some of these guys are going to have to really turn things up a little bit. I think when you talk about talent.
All right, let's go move on here. Jeannie in San Clemente, California. And this is probably for Chris and for Mark. What was the atmosphere inside AT&T Stadium before and during the game?
I will say this. I was impressed with the USC fans. They were actually inside the stadium well before kickoff. And I was asking myself, where in the hell was this passion and energy all season long? You couldn't achieve a sellout at the Coliseum for the Notre Dame game, but you're showing up here? Kudos. I thought the energy and the passion inside the stadium was great. I think Tulane got to enjoy it a little bit more. And those last 5 or so minutes that I was down on the field, I will attest to it. They were having a great time.
Chris, did you have a good time besides the game?
Yes, Mrs. That was the show.
I didn't have a great time. It was, look, USC football is not boring anymore. I was not bored at that game. And, the Tulane fans were very happy to be there, and they were loud and they were excited. They were boisterous, and good for them. I mean, really, and I don't mean that in a dismissive way. Good for them. That's a program that doesn't get these opportunities very much, and their players and their fans sees it. USC did have a pretty good turnout. I thought it was going to be 70-30 Tulane fans. That wasn't really the case. USC fans aren't that loud. We're not that loud at home. We're not that loud on the road, but we did show up, which is more than I can say for the defense.
All right, this is from Johnny in Dallas, Texas. What can Lincoln Riley do to convince us he takes defense seriously?
The question wants the answer, make a change. That's what they want to hear. So let's just ask our viewers and our listeners the question. What would you do? You're the CEO. Did you see development? Do you see the defense getting better? And if you know the answer to that question, you know the answer to your own question.
Let me make one other comment on this. When Lincoln Riley came to USC, he had a pretty good quarterback at USC already. Jackson Dart's a pretty good football player. And he went and started at Ole Miss, and he played pretty well. He's a good football player. And with Lincoln Riley's tutelage and his offense, he would have been, I think, a very good football player. And Riley decided that he was going to upgrade, not because Jackson Dart was bad, but because there was an opportunity that was better. My question is whether or not Lincoln Riley thinks that way about his coaches or only thinks that way about the players. We're going to find out.
Very good point.
All right, from John in Poway, California. What did the panel think of the 2 semifinal games of the college football playoffs? I will start off. I thought they were outstanding. I thought it was great. And I kind of compared what I was watching to where USC is today and came to my own conclusions, but they were fantastic. What do you guys think?
Bits and pieces I watched, they were exciting, but there was better defense, but was there a whole lot of defense in either one of those games?
Well, that's a good point, actually. Anybody want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think USC fans see the USC defense, and again, it's not good, right? But there's a lot of piling on. You watch other games, there's missed tackles, there's offenses running up and down the field. It's Pac-12 officiating, right? Pac-12 officiating gets hammered because it's become a joke, so it's really easy to pile on. You look at officials in every other bowl game all throughout the year, you hear other fans talk about the officiating in their conferences. It's garbage everywhere. They can't stand it. SEC, Big Ten, ACC, whatever it is, they can't stand it. And so if you're just watching USC defense, if you're a USC fan, it looks really bad. I don't know how much worse it is than, and we're talking about the four of the best teams in the country. If you face a good offense, you're going to give up points and yards. It's the way things are right now. So a little perspective, again, we're not sitting there saying, oh, the USC defense is great. There's nothing negative to be said about it, but it gives you some perspective on what a good offense can do to even a good defense.
Yes, but let's be honest. USC's defense is substantially worse than those teams.
Sure.
While it's true, good defenses give up lots of points to good offenses these days. We've talked about the Nick Saban quote to that effect before. The difference is that Michigan is not giving up 37 to Arizona and 35 to Cal and getting gashed 10 yards of play against every good offense they face. They're not. I mean, so Eric's right. It's hard to play good defense in college football these days. It really is. But my frustration is that today wasn't a one-off. This is what USC does just about every time they face a good offense. And when they face a bad offense, they give up 34. I mean, so it's piling on, but it's justified. The numbers are awful, and the reality is that if USC had even a top 30 defense, they would have been in the college football playoff.
I think that we could all agree on that one. Final question from Jerry in Columbus, Ohio. Based on what happened to Ohio State and Michigan in the semifinal games of the college football playoffs, does this panel have any thoughts about USC's chances upon entering the Big Ten in 2024?
I think they're going to be able to compete offensively.
I think they're going to be challenged. You're not going to have Caleb Williams there. You're going to be starting with a brand new quarterback unless you believe that Miller Moss can lead them to a championship conference game of the Big Ten.
At no point in Lincoln Riley's tenure anywhere is there going to be a question about if the quarterback is good or not. I could flat out say that. At no point are you like, oh, we got to go down the depth chart and see who the backup is. Quarterback's going to come play for this guy. So if he's on the roster now or not, or whatever the case may be, I think they're going to be set at quarterback. I don't think the Big Ten was great this year. I think they've got a ton of quarterback issues up and down that league. I think the offense takes a step down in terms of what USC is going to see offensively. I think the Pac-12 is much better offensively than the Big Ten. I think the weather stuff might be an issue. You're going to have to play in some weird games, maybe at weird times in different stadiums. But as far as the teams go, I think the Pac-12 is pretty good this year and might be really good next year.
I agree with everything Eric said. Lincoln Riley's had 4 superstar quarterbacks as a head coach. All 4 of them are transfers. So he's going to find somebody to play quarterback, whether that's Miller Moss or Malachi Nelson or somebody else. And look, the Big Ten isn't all that great. Ohio State and Michigan are good football teams. Penn State is a good football team. The rest of that conference this year was an absolute mess. USC's not losing to those teams. They'd probably beat them 55-40, most of them, but they're not going to lose to them. The Big Ten isn't that good. You have two good teams. You have Penn State, who didn't beat anybody until today, but they're pretty good too. And that's what you have. The rest of the conference isn't anything. USC will be fine in the Big Ten if they tackle somebody.
Well, on that note, a reminder again, if you have any questions or comments for our panel, go to either the WeAreSC message boards, click on the thread that pertains to Inside the Trojans Huddle viewer or listener questions. And with that, that'll do it for Tuesday's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. So until next Tuesday, a big thank you again to our panelists, Marc Kulkin, Chris Arledge, Erik McKinney. You guys are great. And a special big thank you to all of you for watching or listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Have a great week, everybody. And this is your moderator, Greg Katz, wishing you all and saying to you all, fight on, everybody.